what are some Reddit mysteries that still exist or are still ongoing? Story 1, the guy who said he was going to check out a cave he found and was never heard from again. The M Cave one? Yeah, I think I saw a Dateline episode where someone claimed they caught him years later on CCTV camera footage, going through a house, but even that's kind of unclear. He hasn't shown up again in the years following his disappearance. I watched a documentary style horror film recently that freaked me out massively because I found it in the documentary section and thought it was real. Turns out it wasn't and was based on this guy. Something like Death in the High Desert or Horror in the High Desert. Good watch if you're into that. Story 2. It's not really an internet mystery, but it has definitely stumped police and detectives since the 40s. It's of a guy in a hotel room who completely disappeared with maybe another man. The story is from the person who was in the room next to his. They told the police that he was talking to someone even though nobody was with him. They heard the other man say that they needed to leave soon or something, or someone will find them. There were no windows, no other doors, but somehow they left without being seen or heard. They didn't even pay for the night. That man went in, the other man appeared, then they both disappeared completely without a trace. The people who worked there and who checked the man in said he was wearing a suit and tie with a hat and briefcase. At the time, he looked like any other man, so they didn't think about it much. I heard this years ago, so I don't 100% know what really happened in the investigations. It's still pretty weird, though. Story 3, the Smiley Face Assassins. They are thought to be a dark web network for serial assassins. Many people, typically college-age men, would be found floating in water with a smiley face painted somewhere nearby. They were done so similarly that it was very likely they were connected, but they were also done so differently that it was likely different killers. No one was ever caught. Ever. Two people supposedly survived, though, waking up in ponds, I believe. The closest investigators ever got was a dark web URL, but they were unable to access it because it required live webcam verification in order to enter. Story 4, the origin of various creepypasta images. We know the famous Jeff the Killer image. The most credible and commonly held hypothesis is that this image originated from a heavily edited picture of a Japanese woman named Mariko, whose likeness was edited to make the skin deathly pale and replace her eyes and mouth with a ghastly grin and stare. Still remains are the sources of the inexplicable, creepy-looking images attached to various creepypastas. Where did the image of the rake and smile dog come from? What is that thing attached to the Bugman and Gurgles story? Who is the woman depicted in Barbie Avi? Where did the image of a fang-bearing monkey and normal for normal people come from? It'll remain a mystery unsolved for ages to come. Story 5, the one where someone posted about buying an old laptop bag off of eBay and found a hard drive stitched inside the fabric, as if someone was trying to hide it. He couldn't access the HDD because the PCB was removed. He tried to attach a new board, but couldn't get it to work. Another user who claimed to work in a lab that had all the necessary tools to repair the HDD offered to have it shipped to him to recover the data. Trail goes cold after that. After that, a few years go by before internet sleuths digs up the guy who offered to repair its Steam account. They contact him, and it turns out the original dude never even mailed the hard drive to him. Looks like we'll never know what was on that hard drive. Story 6. This is just something creepy that happened to me. I'm subscribed to a tech support subreddit. This guy posted something about being stuck in virtual reality and that nobody believed him. He sounded really paranoid and desperate. I didn't really know what to do for him. So I thought maybe it was a joke, so I commented, $5, this becomes a Reddit scary stories post. A few days later, this guy replies, saying he thought I may be right. I'll let y'all look at it and see what you think. Story 7, my grandfather had been in World War II and told us about when himself and a few other soldiers had been separated from his unit and were trying to get to Normandy. They had gone through a clearing in a wooded area but had to drop when they heard something approaching. They were on their bellies in 3 feet grass when they saw 20 or 30 German soldiers running across the clearing, clearly in a state of panic. Then they just froze in mid-step. He said they resembled statues and that some weren't even touching the ground, and that there was no noise whatsoever. Even the birds had gone silent. After a few seconds came a loud noise, like metal scraping on concrete, and the frozen soldiers started to become blurry to the point at which they vanished without a trace. This had been reported by all of the soldiers that were present. and all were called to the War Office in London after their return to the UK, where they were pressed on what they saw over the period of a few days, and were taken back to the same spot in France shortly after the war had ended. Surprisingly, when they got there were other men sharing the same accommodation who reported similar occurrences in the exact same area. They were all taken to the woods and had to describe where and how the events took place. My granddad had said that the entire area was guarded heavily, and that part of the ground was heavily excavated. The strangest thing of all the others, he said, was that there were hundreds of dogs in the area, just milling around for no apparent reason. They returned to the UK with a gag order, ordering them never to speak about any of this. He went back to the same spot in France before he died in 1985 and said that the area had been covered with unmarked warehouses and was guarded by an unusually professional security company. He reckoned they were military. Story 8. Oh man, I remember in an Ask Reddit thread, someone asked what people's darkest secrets were. Some dude said he sold his house and the land with it, but he was still living in some secret bunker that was hidden in the land. But then some dude on some other account claimed that he was the one who made that story and that he made it all up. But how do we know he made the story? I still think there's some dude living in a bunker. Story 9, I guess it might be exaggerating to call this a Reddit mystery at all, because everyone seems to have forgotten it and moved on, but there was a threat maybe 2 to 3 years ago from a guy saying he had done something to get on a local gang's bad side, and they had pretty much given him a, "We shall round up reinforcements and return tonight at the stroke of." He was soliciting advice on how he could best protect himself or fortify his home against the impending gang invasion. It sounded like he was living the plot of a home invasion thriller. I have a feeling it was just an Ask Reddit thread, because it was early on in my Reddit experience when I rarely went anywhere else, and I think it was front page. People were waiting until the doomsday time of the gang's ultimatum to hear what would happen, and it came and went, but no more updates from our hero after that. Always wondered what happened, or whether there were any leads on how real it ever was, etc. Story 10. Currently, it's the Daniel Robinson case. I don't think there is any possible way it wasn't foul play at this point. People need to keep talking about this. Daniel Robinson was a 24-year-old geologist who went missing after leaving his job site in the Arizona desert almost 2 years ago on June 23, 2021. A month later, his Jeep would be found crashed in a ravine, about 2.5 miles from the job site he was last seen leaving. Daniel's clothes were found in a pile next to his crashed Jeep, his wallet in his pants pocket, and his phone and other personal items in the Jeep. One of Daniel's boots was with his clothes, while the other was lodged underneath the vehicle. Daniel was not with the Jeep and hasn't been seen since leaving the job site on June 23, 2021. Back in early December, Tempe PD did forensics on Daniel's electronics. They told David someone accessed Daniel's computer after he went missing, but before anyone was allowed in his apartment, they said they do not understand why Buckeye PD doesn't see it as a criminal case, and were said to be setting up a meeting with the FBI. A lot more details of the Daniel Robinson case have come out since he first went missing. For more information, you can check out his father's YouTube channel. His father's live all the time, and you are free to ask any questions regarding his son's disappearance. Story 11, 2 years ago. Personal experience, I was working in law enforcement and had to clear a building that we got a call to. My patrol partner and I were in the basement trying to radio dispatch that it was all clear, but the radios weren't functioning. On our way back to the stairs, a chair rolled across the room on its own. We checked for strings, animals, etc. Before we left, the radios began making a groaning sound, and a woman's voice came over the radio, clear as day. "Please don't leave me, it's dark here." I get chills just typing this. Definitely a mystery I won't solve until I kick the bucket myself. See what happens. Story 12, Jason Yulcowski from Nebraska. Disappeared in the middle of the day while walking to his old high school to meet a coworker for a ride to work after getting called in early. He was 19. Last seen by a neighbor putting out the trash at 10:45 a.m. A coworker called his house an hour later because he hadn't showed up. High school cameras don't show him arriving. A 19-year-old vanished in broad daylight at almost noon. I think he knew and trusted his killer. I don't think he made it very far that day. Either someone he knew picked him up, or they got him into their house. Hit and run in the middle of the day seems so unlikely unless the car just punted his body into a thick wood and kept driving. Story 13, Mora Murray. She was a 21-year-old college student from Massachusetts whose car was found in NH in February of 2004. An eyewitness spoke to a woman in her car that evening, but when the police arrived moments later, the woman was no longer there. When shown a picture of Mora, the witness said that was not who he saw. Her car was found in a heavily wooded area on the edge of the national forest. There was ample snow on the ground from previous storms, and no footprints were found going into the woods. The roads, however, were quite dry. She was never seen again. There are so many threads to pull in her disappearance that lead to logical explanations or suspects. However, in almost 20 years, there have been no clear indications of what happened to her. Story 14, What Happened to the Mayas? I strongly recommend a podcast called Fall of Civilizations, which has an episode on the Mayan Collapse. The theory it describes revolves around drought and agricultural collapse. Essentially, the Mayans had developed effective techniques for growing crops in the not particularly fertile soil that surrounded them. However, this form of farming required clear-cutting huge sections of forest and left fields depleted after use. By the time of their collapse, this agricultural system was already being pushed hard to supply the food needs of the population. With Mayan agriculture in a delicate position already, we have geological evidence that the region was hit by a series of severe droughts during the same time the collapse occurred. These droughts would have been devastating, as they not only would have reduced food production, but would have also dried up the thin layer of fertile topsoil in areas the Maya clear-cut for their farms. When this soil dried to dust and blew away, it effectively left them unusable for growing food. With famine starting in some Mayan city-states, their residents would have fled to neighboring settlements. However, already struggling to produce enough food themselves, these settlements would have also collapsed into famine as a result of the population influx. The result was likely a vicious cycle of famine and desperate migration that rippled out across the entire Mayan world. Story 15, Lauren Spearer, 20-year-old IU student who disappeared in June of 2011. She went out drinking at Kilroy's bar with several friends, left to go back to her apartment, not far, with a friend, returned to the bar, then went to a friend's apartment. Last sighting was from a street footage camera, walking barefoot down the sidewalk towards her apartment complex, after stating she'd rather be there instead. That was at about 4:30 a.m. It's interesting to me because my ex-supervisor actually attended Kilroy's with his friends the night she disappeared and sat across the table from her. He said she definitely appeared really messed up, heavily intoxicated. And despite what the family's PI thinks, he wholeheartedly believes the ongoing theory of what happened to her to this day. She is presumed dead, but is still registered as missing. Story 16, I don't know how early internet it is, but the woman who thought the government or someone was listening to her and spying on her in South Korea, I think. That they were trying to control her, I think, too. And webcams were installed, and you could watch her sleeping or on her computer. And her door would be barricaded most of the time. And there were handwritten signs all over the place. I lost the bookmark to the link for the webcams years ago, but I still think and wonder if she is okay, and if the cams are still running. Her name is Chipchan. I don't know much about it, because I just found out about her. On YouTube, she stopped live streaming 5 months ago. However, on some Korean website, she's still live streaming. I'm not sure, but I think that she has severe schizophrenia. She claims that a cop that goes by the name P is following her, and he installed a chip in her foot. Story 17. In the early days of the internet, there was a site which purported to show a massive submarine base being built in the middle of the Amazon. It was documented through a series of photos developed from a camera that had been found in the jungle. The theory was that the camera had been thrown from an airplane that had flown over the base just prior to being shot down. This is not a drug submarine base, but rather something else entirely. It was in the middle of the Brazilian Amazon, far from any body of water, and the submarine itself was giant. The conjecture was that the elite of the world knew something about coming cataclysmic floods that would envelop the planet, and so had built themselves an escape submarine, an ark out there in the sticks. I saw this site in the very, very early days of the web. It was one of the few sites to visit with the new web browsers of the time. But try as I might, I simply cannot find any trace of this site anymore. It has vanished, and even the Internet Archive has no reference to it. It was pretty interesting, that's for sure. The sub looked huge and the pictures of it quite legitimate. Story 18, Lake City Quite Pills. Old Reddit user who used to post here in the really old days, before subreddits even, I think, died. Their friend took over their Reddit account for a bit and let Reddit know. Eventually, people noticed the user was linked to some site. I think it was adult stuff or something, which in turn contained message logs. These message logs were all pretty cryptic. The logs eventually mentioned holding a service for the dude who died, but gave weird requirements like not giving your real name to hotel staff, not being tailed, only American currency, and to remain low profile. Stuff like that. People are a bit suspect of this, and during the same night this party is meant to be happening, some mobsters killed close to the venue of it by hitmen. The website, after a while, was taken down, and all that remains are screenshots of the original logs. Barely Sociable has a vid about the topic on YouTube, which will do it far more justice than I have here, but it is certainly the oldest thing I know of. Story 19, I remember that extremely creepy video of a young guy with longish hair and a very odd way of speaking. I think it was a combination of accent and speech impediment, talking about grave robbing and how to prep the remains for sale. I remember specifically him going into great detail into how to properly clean out the skulls so that they wouldn't rattle when you shook them. Nobody ever came up with an identity, location, or even a solid answer for who was buying the human remains or why. Anyway, I haven't been able to stop thinking about it for a long time because last year a man where I live was arrested for doing the exact same thing. He was digging up graves, taking the remains, and methodically cleaning them for sale. Sale to who? For what reason? It literally drives me insane. Story 20, Elisa Lamb. She was a young woman whose body was found decomposing in a hotel water tower. What's strange is that nobody knows how she got there, as the roof of the hotel is always locked. Even stranger is that the last recording of her was a video of her acting strange on an elevator. It shows her walking into an elevator and waiting for the doors to close, but she keeps peeking out of the elevator as if she was looking for someone following her. The elevator doors for some reason don't close, and after a while, she gets off the elevator and was never seen again, until guests started complaining about foul-tasting water, and they found her body when inspecting the tower. Story 21. On a German radio station in the 1980s, a song was played during a routine broadcast. It was known to play songs from obscure local bands. So at the time, this song was nothing new. In 2007, a clip of the song was posted to a Canadian fan site dedicated to finding songs by a woman under an alias. Nobody seemed to recognize the song. No one came forward to claim it, nor did anyone recognize the voice. In fact, since the records were in Germany, no one knew who made it. In early 2019, Brazilian teen Gabriel da Silva Vieira began searching for more information. In July of 2019, YouTuber Justin Wang released a video on the subject. Both guys sparked a wildfire of internet detectives to search for more. Reddit and Discord worked in tandem and found a few leads, but the long communication process leaves the case open today, and many unanswered questions. Story 22, my specialty, haven't seen any mention of John Titor. If memory serves, in the late 90s, early 2000s, a man going by John Titor called into the Art Bell radio show discussing his time-traveling experiences. He showed up a few years later on the internet, where he showed his time machine, explained how it works, and gave some predictions. Probably pushing 20 years later, no one knows who John Titor really was. The Trip That Never Ends, a video claiming to be found in 2008, of a guy saying he took psychedelics and hasn't stopped tripping for a month. Robert Helpman. It's a channel of a man wearing a mask, dealing with a corpse that he refers to as Daisy. He's shown attempting to feed the corpse before angrily bashing the masked man's head into his bathtub. He's also shown stabbing it, and I believe dismembering it in one video. Mr. Katia, a woman who makes disturbing videos, such as her screaming, then a follow-up video describing an encounter with the police over her screaming, a video of her talking about hiding in the bathroom from an abuser, a video of her sleeping with things written on her wall, with mentions to abortion and abuse, the disappearance of the YouTube personality. Paranormalana. Story 23, Where Did the Simpsons Ghost Go? There was a screamer video I saw as a child, back in 2007, called The Simpsons Ghost. I found it when browsing through YouTube to find episodes of The Simpsons. The video was a still image of Bart praying. Then a few seconds later, a jump scare came out. The thing is, I remember it more than any other because the image was so messed up. I think it was of a bald man, deformed, bathed in yellow paint, and poor skin starts to scream. A 9-year-old me panicked and closed the window after that. Story 24, I forgot their names, but it was a YouTube video called Hi Blank. It's Blank, where he talked to someone through YouTube about how he met this amazing girl, and he talks about her for a few minutes. Then says, "Do you want to see her?" Then shows himself in front of a door. He opens it, and there's a woman changed up screaming, "Bloody Mary." He goes into the room, closed the door, and that's where the vid ends. And apparently, in around the same area, there was a missing case of a woman who matched that description, looked the same, had the same voice, was wearing the same clothes. It was some freaky crap. Story 25, this is a personal mystery, a song that has haunted me since the first few months of WinMeX. Back in those days, you could use the main search, but also browse users' shared folders. So if you found a song or movie or Miss C you liked, you could check out the person's library and see what else they had. And some users, whether intentionally or not, shared everything on their computers. But that's a different story. Back then, I was sponging up any music that wasn't my parents' force-fed classic rock and oldies. Generically named techno mixes were all over the place. There was one song that my GF at the time loved to sync our rhythm with. So naturally, I had that song in every playlist, MP3 player, and mixtape, and CD. It was only listed as the Chime song when I downloaded it with no artist or details. And I was regularly downloading hundreds of files from hundreds of users every day. So there was no way of knowing where I got it, even a few days later. Even though I've been through like 8 new and rebuilt computers, and maybe double corrupted and dead hard drives, was a reckless pirate. This song has always persisted. And over the 20-ish years since, I've used plenty of those "what song is this" sites, apps, and forums, and received zero definitive answers. It was almost certainly just someone's pet project, but not knowing the artist has really oddly bothered me most of my life.